Hi, SimPilot Andrew here, and if you're new to the channel and want to see flight sim hardware and software product reviews, or you just enjoy flying to anywhere, start now by subscribing and clicking on the bell icon below. Let's go flying. Welcome to the flight for today. Today we're going to be testing out some new additions to my home cockpit. I'm going to be looking at specifically the CP Flight MCP that you can see in the middle of the screen here. It consists of two elements, the EFIS, which controls the navigation display, and the MCP, which controls your airspeed, heading, altitude, vertical speed, and it's also the autopilot engage and disengage. So we'll be demonstrating that, and also we'll be demonstrating another new piece of my cockpit, which is going to be the new CDU from Cockpit Master. It's a great piece of equipment, hardware add-on to the flight sim, and really does add to the realism of the flight. So strap yourself in, here we go. So we're sitting on the ramp in San Francisco. We're going to fly from San Francisco to Seattle, and you can see on the right hand side I also have the Zibo mod for the 737, which allows you to execute electronic flight bag functions. So the first thing we're going to do is fuel the plane based on the flight plan. So first of all, we're going to take a look at the flight plan. This is generated from SimBrief. It's a great website for simulation purposes, generates almost real-world operational flight plans. I have it set to calculate in pounds. So as you can see, the block fuel requirement from San Francisco to Seattle is 17.2 pounds. So we're going to go ahead and enter that into the flight bag and start the refueling process. So we're going to add the 17.2 fuel is what we need. So 17.2 of fuel, and actually we have 7,000 pounds on right now. So we're going to call for the fuel truck to actually get a fuel truck to add that amount of fuel to the plane. That's the first step. Then we need to jump back to the flight plan and look at how many passengers are on the flight for today. If we scroll down in the flight plan down to this section here, you can see that we've got 184 passengers. So we're going to go ahead and enter that into the flight bag as well. So under the payload section, I'm just going to go to the payload total and type in 184, and then the little blue button here is for passengers. Enter. It does a random distribution of the male and female and kids, and in this case it's all males sitting in various different sections to give you a payload total. So if we go back to weight and balance, you see now that the payload now is in pounds. You have the zero fuel weight plus the required fuel and the actual fuel that's in the aircraft itself. As you can see right now outside, we have a shell truck actually refueling the plane. Also, if you look on the right hand side up on the engine instruments, you can see the fuel is gradually increasing as the fuel is pumped into the left and the right wing tanks of the 737. As you can see now, we have 17.2 pounds worth of fuel in the aircraft. Now we can go ahead and start programming the FMC. Programming the FMC is really quite easy, following data that you can pull from the SimBrief operational flight plan. The actual CDU FMC is from Cockpit Masters. It's the brand new release that is really simple to install and get running. Basically it's one cable, one USB cable plugs in the back into your machine, and there's a software bridge that runs on your computer that connects the actual unit to whatever flight sim you're using. It supports almost all the major flight sims with the support for Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 coming in the future. I'm using it with X-Plane and the Zibo 737 mod. So let's get on to programming the flight computer. Okay, so let's move forward. So standard initial screen, for those that are familiar with programming the 737's flight management computer, gives you the model that you're flying in, also the navigation data. It shows here the date that the valid navigation data is set up in the system. I have Navigraph's data in X-Plane, so it shows the current 2106, I think, is the latest version. So first of all, you need to initialize what position you're in. We are at San Francisco, so that's Kilo Sierra Foxtrot Oscar is the reference airport, and it puts the GPS coordinates in there. Also, ordinarily you would have to put in the IRS position, which has already been put in here for us because we had started with the engines started originally. The route that we're taking, it automatically puts in San Francisco as the airport that you're starting from, and we're going to Seattle, which is Kilo Sierra Echo Alpha, and the call sign that we're using today is WestJet 555. And now you go over to the performance initialization page. It's asking for our gross weight, and since we've now got our passengers on board and we've fueled up, if you just click the button, it gives you what your gross weight is going to be for takeoff. It also is asking for what your planned fuel is, and in this case we know it's 17.2. The zero fuel weight is 127.5. Reserves is actually the sum of your alternate and your FinRes is the number I've been using, which is 5.8. I'm going to call it 5.9 as your reserves. And the cost index, you can see in the top right hand part of the screen there, is actually 11. Now to actually look at the cruising altitude, you need to go back to your operational flight plan, and you can see here that our cruising altitude at the top of climb is flight level 360. So we enter in 360. It's also looking for the winds at that altitude, and here it's 226 at 6.2. It's looking for the deviation from a temperature standpoint, and top of climb, it is actually plus 12. And we move on to the N1 limit. It's looking for the outside air temperature, and my engine display has it on there as 21 degrees. So you put that as the outside air temperature, and it will calculate what your D-rate percentage of throttle is going to be for the takeoff. And at this point, we're going to put it at, we're going to leave it at the 26K, and it's 99.7% of thrust. On takeoff, we're going to use 5 degrees of flaps, and you'll notice that it automatically puts in what your V speeds are going to be, which we'll accept in a minute. We go to the center of gravity is 20.4, and our trim is set. It's recommending we put it at 5.5, so we can actually set that up just before we back away here. So change that to 5.5. So we enter in our V speeds, and that's the takeoff reference page. You'll notice on the left-hand side in our flight display, you'll notice the V speeds on the ticker on the left-hand side have been added based on the programming that we've done so far in the flight management computer, and also on the FMC it gave us a V2 speed of 147, so we're going to set our indicated airspeed on the MCP to that number to 147, and we'll come back and adjust our course for the runway that we're taking off on, and also the heading as well once we're done programming the rest of the flight into the FMC. Okay, now we're finished with the takeoff reference page. We're actually going to enter in the flight plan into the FMC and make sure all of the various waypoints that we're going to be following up to Seattle are programmed properly into the computer. So the first thing we want to do is go to departure and arrivals page, and the first thing we want to do is pick the departure that we're going to be using. So if you look at our operational flight plan, it shows that we're leaving from runway 28, so 28 right, so we'll pick 28 right, and the departure that we're using, standard instrument departure, is trunk N2, which is selected now, so that gives us the departure runway, and it gives us the departure procedure selected from our flight plan. So now we can start to enter in the rest of the flight plan in here. So our next waypoint is DHD. We put that on the right hand side. Waypoints go on the right hand side, and if you're entering in airways, they go on the left hand side, hence the VIA and the 2 and on the display. The next step in our flight plan is direct to RBL. The DCT in the flight plan means direct, so our RBL is a VOR. So we enter that in. The next step is direct to LMT. And it comes up and asks me, well, which one do you want? So I happen to know it is this first one here. So direct to LMT, and then Hawks Z7 into Seattle for 16 left. That's actually the arrival procedure. So now that we're done with the waypoints themselves, we actually hit the departure and arrival button again and select the arrival for Seattle. We're going into 16 left, so we select 16 left, and then the Hawk Z7 arrival procedure is on the left hand side, so we select that too. So now what we'll do is we've done the departure, we've done the waypoints that we're actually going to be flying, and we've done the arrival into Seattle. We're actually going to take a look at the flight plan now, actually on our navigation display, to make sure that there's no breakages in the steps that we're taking as we go along the airways. So we press the legs key on the FMC. It takes us to the list of legs that from the departure through to the transition through to the actual steps that we're taking in the flight plan. We're going to just flip through the different pages here to make sure that the actual waypoints themselves match our flight plan. So you'll notice here on the second page we actually have a discontinuity between LMT and the arrival procedure. So we're actually going to select that the first waypoint after the route discontinuity, and then bump it up a line, which will then make it so that it's connected. So if I go to the next page now, these are all of the steps within the arrival procedure that take you down to 16 left in Seattle. You'll notice that one of the waypoints in here, based on the procedure, is a vector that you'll normally get from air traffic control. I normally will ignore those and go direct to the waypoint that's in there. And fly in towards CARFO, since we won't be flying with air traffic control today. So those are all of the steps in the flight plan. We're going to execute that and then activate it. And you'll notice the first waypoint turns the magenta color, which is essentially the next active waypoint for you, which is our after we've taken off from the runway. Now we're going to take a look at the navigation display and step through the flight plan to make sure that we agree with everything that's in there graphically. So I have the FMC on the left hand side, and then the navigation display is displayed on the right, and I have it switched in the EFS to plan mode, and you'll notice on the FMC the bottom right hand line select key says step. What this step allows you to do is step through the flight plan, and as I press the button, it will jump from waypoint to waypoint, and it will follow the flight plan through the arrival procedure all the way to the airport. So that looks good. So now I have the main MCP showing along with the main instruments, the outside view, and also on the right hand side I switched from SimBrief into Navigraph to actually show the planned route. So since I had planned this in SimBrief, you can actually load the SimBrief flight plan into Navigraph and show it on the chart. Now what I want to do is bring up the charts for San Francisco, the airport itself. So I go to Open Charts, Taxi, Airport, and Navigraph has a really neat feature that it actually will recognize based on where you are from a simulator perspective, where you are in the airport. So we are taking off from 28 right. So we will be taxiing back around this way across the couple of active runways into 28 to take off. So we'll keep that chart open for when we push back and then taxi to the runway. The other thing that we're going to check when we're here is just the actual degrees on the runway itself. So you'll notice there, runway 28 right is 284. So what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to set the courses for the runways and the headings actually in the MCP itself. (284) and course at 284. We're also going to turn the flight directors on. Left then right, and you notice the one on the left says MA for, that's the one that's the active one. So that's the master, with this co-pilots being the secondary, because I'm the pilot flying from a captain perspective. Well, that's it for now. There's a quick demonstration of the new FMC from Cockpit Master, an excellent piece of hardware, very easy to use. You plug it in and it just works. And also the MCP and the EFIS from CP Flight, I had pretty much the same experience. Plug it in, get the plugin set up within X-Plane, turn it on, get the bridge running, and it works. So tune in next time for the continuation of this flight, where we fly from San Francisco to Seattle. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.